Good morning and welcome to the June work session of the Cobb County Board of Education. First order of business, would you please join me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And do I understand correctly, Mr. Doyle, we have no public comments this morning? All right, thank you very much. If everyone has had a chance to review the minutes of the May 18th board session, and if there are no objections, okay, those minutes will stand approved. And now, in the interest of time, the superintendent has requested that we move the superintendent's report up above the board business, and we have a guest speaker. Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm going to ask Mr. Brad Johnson, our CFO, to come forward and introduce the SPLOST 4 performance audit.
Good morning, Board. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent. Each year, the district engages in an array of independent financial auditors to assess the financial condition of the district. It's important for Cobb citizens to know that taxpayer funds are professionally handled, and it is important that an independent party performs these audit functions. This is the time of the year when we have our SPLOST audit reviewed from a performance standpoint, and we have auditors here today to present their audit opinion of SPLOST operations and financial controls for the SPLOST 4 program as of the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2016. The primary objective of a performance audit of educational sales tax expenditures is to determine that sales tax dollars are being dispersed efficiently and economically so that the school district receiving the funds is obtaining the maximum benefit possible from the tax dollars collected. This is achieved through the design and execution of a series of audit procedures which our external auditor has completed. The performance audit has several objectives. Number one, to determine if construction projects and equipment purchases were executed in accordance with the SPLOST 4 resolution. Two, to verify that the school board has established and adhered to specific policies regarding requisitions and approvals and selection of contractors. Three, to verify that management is monitoring the progress of construction progress through routine status checks on site. Four, to verify there is effective communication to the board on the status of SPLOST 4 projects. And number five, to determine that SPLOST 4 funds are being deposited in accordance with Georgia law and to determine if proceeds are invested in a manner that yields a competitive investment return for the school district. The Financial Services Division works very closely with SPLOST Operations Department throughout the year to make sure that the SPLOST projects are properly implemented and financially recorded in accordance with generally accepted financial procedures. Mr. Tom Marshall, who is a finance director in the Finance Division over AP and capital projects, he's here today. He works closely with Mr. Nick Parker on all SPLOST projects, working hand in hand to smoothly coordinate capital projects in the school district, and I want to thank both of them for their work throughout the year. Today, Mr. Christian Hatch of the CPA firm Williamson and Company, CPAs from Cartersville, Georgia, is attending our board work session to present his firm's SPLOST 4 performance audit results and conclusions. Each of you has a copy of the most recent performance audit at your desk. After having examined the document myself, Mr. Chair, I think the board will be pleased with the district's performance regarding the SPLOST program, but because this is an independent audit, I will keep my remarks summarized and let the auditor present his findings himself. With that introduction, Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce Mr. Christian Hatch and have him approach the podium to make his presentation to the board.
Good morning. On behalf of Williamson and Company CPAs, I'd like to thank the Cobb County School District and members of management for engaging us to conduct the performance audit of the SPLOST 4 program for the 12 months ended December 31st, 2016. Our audit was performed in accordance with performance audit standards set forth by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. The objective of our audit, as Brad mentioned, was to determine to the maximum extent possible that the school district is expending tax dollars for the SPLOST 4 program efficiently and economically in order to maximize the benefit from the tax dollars collected. After performing our audit procedures, we have concluded that the SPLOST 4 program of the Cobb County School District operated within the guidelines set forth by the state of Georgia and the local resolution passed by the voters and approved by the school board for the 12 months ended December 31st, 2016. The procedures we performed to attain this assurance involved obtaining an understanding of the school district's policies and procedures as they relate to the SPLOST 4 program, then performing test work on various aspects of that program. Test work included examining a sample of SPLOST 4 expenditures recorded during the year to determine the expenditures were booked in the correct period, for the correct amount, and most importantly, allowable under the approved SPLOST 4 resolution. Throughout the course of our audit, we found no instances of unallowed or improperly recorded expenditures for the audit period. We also examined bid packages, project progress reports, bank statements, minutes of meetings of the school board and the Facilities and Technology Oversight Committee to achieve our objectives and obtain our assurance on the SPLOST 4 program. SPLOST 4 collections for the audit period were $129,276,540. Total collections for the first 3 years of the SPLOST 4 program were $369,607,757. Collections on the SPLOST 4 program will end December 31st, 2018. SPLOST 4 expenditures for the audit period were $144,200,458. Total expenditures for the first 3 years of the program were $298,626,089. In summary, we feel that the Cobb County School District has put in place effective policies and procedures to ensure that the SPLOST 4 dollars collected are being held and expended appropriately within the guidelines set forth by the state of Georgia, and the expenditures are allowable under the voter-approved resolution. This concludes my presentation of the performance audit of the school district's SPLOST 4 program for the 12 months ended December 31st, 2016. If there are any questions, I can try to address those now, or you can contact me after the meeting and I will get you an answer as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Hatch, and thank you to your team for the audit. And now I'll entertain any questions or comments from board members. Anything from Mr. Hatch? Mr. Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 4, where you've got the breakdown of the revenues and the expenditures,
Yes, sir.
the original budget of $717 million and the revised budget of $692 million, is that a result of the change in the car tax versus the car fee?
I think what happens is you guys set forth an amount you would like to collect realistically, and then as time goes on, you assess how these collections are coming in, and you also allocate for your GSFIC funds and the interest as it goes along, and then adjust that budget accordingly. So I don't know if the car tax had anything to do with this particular modification. I think it's more of an allocation of the full 717 throughout other sources of income in the SPLOST 4 program. So if you see the total SPLOST 4 revenues are still coming in at the 717,844 if you go down to the total line.
Okay. Well, when I go over to the revised section of the budget,
Yes, sir.
you got the $692 million as expected revenues. And then we got the interest, and then we got capital outlay funds, which brings us back into the balance of 717. So far, it looks like we have actually received 22 million of that 24 million. Is that correct?
22 million. Yes, sir, of the state capital outlay funds.
Okay. Now, we've got some other major projects that are very large that we will, in the future, be getting capital outlay. So how would that change this 717?
I think what's going to happen, when I look at, if I go out for the remaining 2 years of the collections, it doesn't look like, unless something drastically changes, it doesn't look like you guys are going to get to the 692, 504, 047. So I think what's going to continue to happen is that's going to drop down as the GSFIC, the state capital outlay funds, will increase. So I think you're still going to be, like say this time next year, I think your revised budget total is still going to be the 717, 844, but you'll see a less amount on the SPLOST 4 revenues and a larger amount on capital outlay funds.
Okay. In reviewing OCGA 20-2-260, it talks about reimbursements. Do we only ask for reimbursements on actual facilities? Because in my interpretation and understanding of what the language says, we could be actually getting reimbursements on computers and any other things that fall within the categories that are specified in that OCGA. Do we ask for reimbursements on computers and that sort of thing?
I would have to research that a little more myself. As far as this particular performance audit goes, I have not seen any of those types of reimbursements. All I've seen is particular construction projects.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Banks, I think the questions he's able to answer, the ones related specifically to the audit, how the audit was performed. The other kind of questions you're asking would be maybe directed to Mr. Johnson at a different time when we discuss the budget.
Well, the reason I bring it up is we've got capital outlay on here, and I'm just wondering if we're really getting all the capital outlay money that we should be getting.
Right.
Okay. The question has been raised.
And I saw heads nodding yes. We couldn't hear them, but saying yes, we are getting all that. Well, Mr. Adams, if you'd like to weigh in.
Yes, to answer the question, Mr. Banks, is we aggressively pursue capital outlay to the extent allowed by law. So we apply for everything that we can possibly get and try to maximize that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hatch? Mr. Scamahorn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of real quick ones. This is an annual audit.
Yes, sir.
Do you go back into previous years just to kind of double check and to bring it up, or?
We do. We're engaged for the life of this particular audit. So we do, as part of our planning for the 16 audit, we go back and review our 15 audit file.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And do you look at every transaction, or
No,
do you
we
just
look at
spot check?
a sample. We pull a sample. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Is that a random kind of thing, or do you let the computer do it, or how?
No, we start from the population, and then we determine a number of transactions we want to look at, and we systematically pull that number, and then in order to increase coverage, because when you pull that sample, it's never really enough dollar-wise to look at. So then after that, then I specifically identify other transactions to get a good percentage to look at.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Scamahorn, Ms. Thayer?
Thank you. And this may be something that staff is going to have to answer instead of you also, but am I missing something? I thought the other projections we had were that we were about 6% off target. This is significantly more than 6% off our projections for revenues for SPLOST.
I'm not aware of the 6% difference, and I don't know how much has caught up between, say January 1st of 17 to now. Maybe it's accelerated based on, compared to what my projection was. So I'm not real sure.
Let me add a little bit to that. So we are starting to see, hopefully, the trend is revenues are ticking up. Because as we talked about with the Brave Stadium, we knew that the revenues were going to be a little bit lagging as far as when they actually opened the stadium and started playing in this season. So we are starting to see revenues coming in that are above projections, which is the first time that we have seen that. Secondly, I'll go back to Mr. Banks's question about, the impact. The tag tax is going to have a pretty, I'll say, significant impact on SPLOST revenue. When SPLOST 4 first passed, that's right about the same time, and I don't know the dates exactly, but it's right about the same time that the tag tax changed. We knew it would have an impact. We didn't know how much of an impact. It's going to have a significant impact to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. I'm just going to say it's looking like it's going to be well south of $100 million impact, which is very significant. But until we get to the end of the revenue collection period, December 31 next year, we're really not going to know what kind of impact it has had. Obviously, when the new tag tax was constructed and implemented, we were told as a district it was going to be a make whole thing and kind of a budget neutral. Well, that's true and not true. True maybe in numbers, bottom line, but not true in that what we would have received in SPLOST revenue is now coming in the form of general fund revenue because it's from a different source. So, and we all know that you can't use SPLOST revenue for salaries, and generally we don't use general fund revenue for construction. So that presents to us somewhat of an issue once we determine exactly how much impact the tag tax has had. So all of that being said, I mean, this time next year, we'll probably be able to say pretty confidently what the impact has been, but ultimately not until December 31 or January 1 of 2019 will we be able to say, okay, the tag tax had this impact. And we really will never be able to say to the penny what the impact was, but we can certainly look at revenues as they were projected and revenues as they were collected and determine, okay, the economy certainly had some impact. The Braves certainly will have some impact, and the tag tax will certainly have some impact. And I'll add to that there has never been a SPLOST in this district that we have hit the revenue projection number. And that, unfortunately, has to be somewhat deliberate because, as we discussed during this SPLOST campaign, and creation, that we are much different in our SPLOST creation than, say, the county, who can exceed their projected number and keep on collecting revenue. The school district cannot.
Right.
So while I'll say we've never hit the number, it's good that we've never hit the number because, we need to do a good job in planning. However, that being said, where we kind of ran a little bit into some trouble with SPLOST 4 is we didn't have an undesignated classroom in SPLOST 4. So that's coming back on us. But the reason you have undesignated classroom is because you expect growth. You don't necessarily know where the growth is. And in SPLOST 4, we were really in a mode of replacing older facilities, not building new facilities. So all of that to say, it really is a very difficult task to come close to the exact number that we think will be projected. And again, if you guess low, then it's a detriment for us, obviously, as the district. So I don't even know if that helped, because I think I've talked around the world twice.
Well, it does, but back to the car tax then. So you're saying, if I heard you correctly, on the car tax, we will be somewhat made whole. It's not coming in the SPLOST, but it's coming into the general fund.
That was what we were told.
Okay,
To help swallow the medicine.
okay. That's not true so far, though?
Not penny for penny, no.
But it's somewhat.
It's, Brad, you want to, I need help here with numbers because I don't want to misstate.
Yeah, initially, the car tag revenue was birthday tax only. And then they passed a law, now when you buy a new car or a new used car, you pay a title fee. Well, because now it's a title fee, it's not a sales tax anymore, it's a fee. So those fees go into the general fund. Initially, when the car tag issue came up, and now there's two sources, because you still continue to pay your birthday tax for the old cars that you have, but if you buy a new one, you pay the title fee. So we've had both of these going simultaneously for a while. Initially, there was a spike. So in the general fund, we got a lot more money initially because we were not only getting birthday tax, but then they were buying new cars too. And usually when you do the title fee, you pay it all up front. And so it's just a one and done thing. But now what's happening is, as the economy's improved, more people are selling their old cars and buying new cars. So there's less and less birthday tax. So our numbers continuing to go down, and we're worried that it will continue to be a wash. It was supposed to be revenue neutral, but we're looking at it. And in our budget numbers, we've tried to account for that decreasing birthday tax. And you probably, or you might have seen that on the budget numbers.
Well, the only thing I was going to say was that if it's not going in SPLOST, but going into the general fund, at least we have more latitude in the general fund, you know, with the monies, I mean, of what we could use it for. So that would be a little bit of a plus there.
From conceptually speaking, yes. In all actuality, as we'll get into the budget approval process later, when we're not able to, you know, even have a raise, I would be hard pressed to bring the board anything, a recommendation to use general fund for, to supplement a SPLOST program, project, even though we can show, you know, that there has been some fluctuation of funds going from one revenue source to another revenue source.
Right, right. And the last part of my question, though, is we still have to say that the 6% below is off target, right? We're far exceeding that, being below our revenue anticipation.
Well, again, it's difficult to say because hopefully we will see the Braves impact continue to trend up and the economic impact continue to trend down as a negative. Now, the tag tax is really difficult to say, but just throwing a number out, it could be as much as $40 million impact, the way it's trending. Now, again, you know, we're looking at those numbers very often and trying to make sure just what Brad just said, you know, that as the birthday tax continues to diminish, the fear is that it will continue to diminish down to a negligible amount. And then are we actually going to see the tag fees? Because, see, here's the problem. Don't want to go glass half empty, but if there's another economic dip and people, for whatever reason, the impact is people buy less cars, they're not paying the birthday tax. So if they don't buy new cars, then that fee is not collected, and then the general fund revenue being collected from that process greatly diminishes.
Thank you, Ms. Thayer. Mr. Adams, did you want to contribute?
Yes, sir, just to reinforce what Mr. Ragsdale said, to give you some actual numbers, looking at May, the sales tax revenues for this May, the first good news is that they're 1.3% above the projections even. That's unusually good news. Usually we run below the projection. But what I like even better than looking at comparisons versus projections is look year to year for the same month. And looking at May 2017's actual sales tax revenues versus 2016 actual just for the month of May, revenues are up 7%. And that would be the first full month of the Braves' impact, or the first month of the Braves' impact, maybe not even a full month, depending on the cycle. So we're hoping, knock on wood, that trend will continue.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Adams. Mr. Hatch, you've done a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Probably standing up here during the discussion is probably tougher than going out and doing an audit and a sampling.
It's not been bad at all.
But while you're standing here, it gives us an opportunity to talk about the subject. But anyway,
Absolutely.
thanks again to you and your team, and we appreciate all you do.
Thank y'all.
And unless there's anything else, I'll say thanks. Thank you also, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Now, and you can make a contribution here next. Moving on to board business, Mr. Scott Sweeney was our official delegate to the Georgia School Board Association this past weekend in Savannah, and we've asked him to give a report. Please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of comments. Mr. Banks was also in attendance at the meeting, too, and I just want to talk about some of the highlights. The most important one, I think, was Georgia's update on ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, the accountability model. Essentially, it's basically the achievement gaps and working on closing these things. And we've been given a tremendous opportunity with local control, not only with the choices that we've made, but the state as well. The biggest message that was conveyed is don't screw it up. The thing is given this flexibility, there is certain accountability measures that will be imparted upon us, and that, we've got a golden opportunity to essentially guide and steer our own ship. As far as the ESSA plan is concerned, the 2016-17 school year will be a transition period with a continuation of Georgia's current accountability plan unless changes are required by the U.S. Department of Education guidance. Full implementation of Georgia's ESSA plan will be effective in the 2017-2018 school year. The public comment period for ESSA for Georgia's plan begins this month. The targeted date for Georgia's plan submission is September 18th, though that date is subject to change. It may be a bit earlier in the month. So if for those that are concerned, and if you are interested in submitting any comments relative to Georgia's ESSA plan, I encourage you to go to the Georgia Department of Education website and seek information there. Georgia Department of Education State School Superintendent Richard Woods also spoke. Biggest message he had is that the Department of Education, I think, has been viewed in many instances as being a punitive agency, and that he was suggesting that their goal is to be a model of support, particularly for schools seeking flexibility going forward. A keynote speaker was the Miami-Dade County Public Schools Superintendent, Albert Carvalho, and he actually, I think a lot of people there kind of question whether he was the right person to address this body. Mindful that Georgia is comprised of 180 different school systems. Many of them are very small systems, and here you have the fourth largest school system in the country, its superintendent speaking to Georgia school board members and other administrators. But he gave a really, really good speech. The focus of his speech was really the turnaround story for the Miami-Dade districts. And he had several key points. The most important thing was getting everybody on the same page. And that starts with the families, starts at the grassroots level, starts with the business community, getting the students, the administrators, the principals, the teachers, everybody on the same page. Most important thing is allowing teachers to plan and students do the work. Every school needs to determine what a good school looks like. What does their good school look like? A message he had was we talked a lot about remediation and the importance of not necessarily remediation only to grade level. Because essentially by the time you've remediated to grade level, people have already moved past you. Echoing what we realize as the Cobb County Board of Education is the improvement of literacy, particularly at the third grade level. And we've spoken internally about the remarkable job with some of the plans that we have through our accountability and curriculum. Another thing is applying rational problem solving. It's not necessarily understanding how to do a formula in math, for example. It's why is this formula important? What is the practical application? How is the formula used by day-to-day businesses? And I'm just using math as an example, but it applies in all other areas as well. And I think this is something he has suggested that his experience has shown that it takes 3 years to learn, adopt, and implement new practices. We're witnessing some of that here within the school district because what we're doing is being much more pragmatic. We're not jumping on and adapting the latest fad. We're taking a very pragmatic approach to the plan. It's important for board members to understand the process of how we're going about changes and modifications. Board members need to be conversant about what's happening within their district, and they must rely on the superintendent and administrative team for their expertise. Novel idea that they had that I thought was interesting, and perhaps it's something that we could consider, is periodically having students do presentations before the Board of Education to demonstrate what is being learned in the classroom. And I thought that might make our board meetings last a little bit longer, but there are some marvelous and remarkable things that are happening with our schools, and it'd be great maybe to see some of that. He had 5 key takeaways. Number 1 being accountability, the focus being on continual improvement, quality instruction, leadership, and how policies trickle down, having the right leaders at the helm, true instructional leaders, and data-driven leaders. Shortly after he arrived in Miami-Dade, I think he fired, was it 9 principals? 9 high school principals. It was really an accountability thing more so than anything else, because they weren't seeing the results. And I am not suggesting that we do anything of the kind. However, it was a real important thing. He says that every time they turned around and they saw the superintendent, he was asking the question, "What do you do?" They were in significant disarray as far as budget was concerned, to the tune of, I think, almost $1 billion in lost revenues because of the economic crisis. So they really had to turn some things around quickly. The line that he used is that if you don't what you do, when people walked into the elevator with him, they weren't really sure what to do, because he would say, "What do you do?" And he says, "Maybe you should not be on this elevator." Teacher effectiveness, the importance of quality of teachers versus qualification. He really described how he went in depth into the business community and sought subject matter experts and did a great deal of recruiting from the private sector. Mr. Morgan, one of the key things that you've done, and one of the things that we've tried to open up in the school as much as possible, is choice programs. 65% of the students in the Miami-Dade system participate in choice programs of some kind. And it's not necessarily that they're going to particular schools, it's choice within a particular school, programs of choice within a particular school. And they have more than 500 choice programs. Most important feature is connecting learning to application. Digital access and equity was also mentioned during the recession period. The Miami-Dade school system was able to turn a local $7 million raise from the business community into $70 million federal investment in technology. And through that, they were able to provide personal devices to all students across the entire system. They've abandoned the seat time model. They basically have created a digital journey for all students, a plan for all students, and then followed up by retooling of teacher skill sets, by continuous training, continuous improvement, and staying up to speed on current technologies. So the last thing I would share is that they did adopt the legislative priorities. I do have a copy of that with some of my notes, and I'll actually be happy to maybe share that with Lynn so she can share that with each of the board members. The last thing I'll leave with is, and this actually is back to the car tag tax. One of the legislative priorities that they have addresses this issue, and one of the things that they're seeing at the state level is that the revenues will actually spike up and then come down significantly. There's not a solid trend. I mean, you could obviously trend that over time, but year to year, there's a significant swing. And I'm going to read just this portion of it. It says, the tax was designed for the state to get more in the early years, but the distribution would shift more to the local governments over time. The local share is supposed to increase annually until 2022, but the statute includes a local target collection that eliminates the increase if the actual local revenues statewide exceed the target by 1% or more. So there's a trigger element here as far as determining whether or not we're getting the full measure of the fees or not. Because the local revenue was $68 million more than the target, the local share of the TAVT dropped from 45% to 40.55%. If it had not exceeded the target, the local share would have increased to 46.5%. Most communities are receiving less revenue from vehicles under the system. So there's a particular target and a measure in there, and basically it determines whether or not you're getting the full measure or less than the full measure of these funds. So the Georgia School Board Association adopted a legislative priority, number one, to make this more transparent and create an equitable compared to the revenue received under the prior ad valorem sales tax system. Any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Scammahorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Excellent report. On school choice, did he get a sense on how they implemented that?
No. Basically, he just covered, what they were doing in their program. And the biggest thing I would say is that they were doing it primarily within the schools. I mean, there are choice programs within the schools. And what I did want to have a chance to do is talk with him. He had to leave very promptly after his speech. But, the clearest thing, obviously, that comes up to mind is transportation questions. What happens, for those choice programs that are all over the county? We do that with our magnet programs and so forth and create, some transportation options. But I can only imagine with 65% of the students participating in choice programs and their student population exceeds 300,000 students, it's the fourth largest system in the entire country. Transportation would be a significant thing, and I think that's why they've tried to roll things out within the individual schools.
Well, thank you, and I recommend to the superintendent that he buy Mr. York an extra pencil. So, thank you.
Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To add on what Mr. Sweeney and the question that was asked about school choice is the superintendent went into a lot of detail about how that developed, and it was not from a top down, it was from a student up. What they did, they went and found out what do the students want. What's their priority? What are they looking for in the future? What's their needs? So this was a choice, like Mr. Sweeney said, it's in the school system itself or the school itself, but it's not necessarily from a principal standpoint or a superintendent standpoint. It's from a student standpoint, and and Mr. Sweeney touched on this about the subject areas. They do use a lot of what they call expert masters in the classroom. It's not just you're a teacher and you can teach geography or world history or whatever. They're looking for people who are experts in these particular disciplines. And he went into a lot of detail about, when he got there, there was a lot of problems, And when you fire 9 principals in high school, you got a board to contend with. But he did finally get board approval for it. Then he did something else later on, which raised some eyebrows with the board. But anyway, he was concerned about the achievement gap, which they have done a lot of improvements on, and he was looking at the opportunity gaps that those are the 2 areas that he was talking about as far as gaps and doing something about closing those gaps. So he was an interesting individual. He's got some great ideas. He's accomplished a lot. He was talking about, I think Miami-Dade, it has the most AP courses in the nation. I mean, it's big. So since he's been there, 3 years? Was it 3 years he's been there? I think it's been 3 years. he's made some tremendous improvements in that school district. So we might want to take a look and see what he's done, how he did it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Any other questions or comments from Mr. Sweeney or Mr. Banks? Ms. Thayer, did I, okay. All right, thank you very much for that report. We appreciate that. Our next item is parental involvement with Mr. Morgan. Mr. Morgan.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone. I do want to continue to focus on the importance of parental engagement and involvement. As I said, I think maybe this time last year, it's the single biggest indicator of a child's success. Non-school factor is that child having the level of involvement that he or she deserves. And that it really strikes a chord with me, especially in our most vulnerable communities where, you know, those babies having a stable, parental paradigm, so to speak, is gravely important for them to be successful. To the credit of this school board, after much discussion and debate, we took a step forward. I'm reading a book right now about JFK and Martin Luther King and how Martin Luther King was pushing JFK, saying, "Hey, civil rights is every man and every citizen deserves." And JFK was he was tepid. He was tepid about it. Started out very tepid, and I think most of us know how history has unfolded. Won't get into that. But the larger point that I'm making is that it's amazing to me how we romanticize change long after the fact, but typically the most massive and transformational change sometimes is very incremental and over time. It's not just one fell swoop. And that's how I see parental engagement involvement, is that how do we take it from what's been so ingrained to the status quo, and in some cases, and I'm not speaking about present company, it's an apathetic cog that we're so conditioned to, that how do we take that and drive it up to a place where children are able to get what they deserve from parents? Having said that, the credit that we deserve is every single school now in the school strategic plan has to put their goals or their objectives around parental engagement involvement. That's the good news. Now, I'm one of those school board members. I actually follow the strategic plan. Every school, I actually click on it, and I look at it. And let me tell you where we are, guys. If you look at the first, I know one of the bullets has to deal with data, right? If you look at the schools and what they're going to do around data, you see robust information. You see it. It's there. Hey, this is how we're going to use data. This is how we're going to differentiate. This is what it's going to look like. These were our results from the previous year, and that's how we're going to modify what we're doing this year. Parental engagement involvement, guys, largely, I'm just putting that on the paper because they told me to put it on there. Case in point, I won't even name the schools. School in my post, their parental engagement involvement for the 2016-2017 school year, what they put on the website was review advanced ed survey. And we will review the school strategic plan with key stakeholders. That's what they said was their objective for the 2016-2017 school year. And now you have a wild undulation. I have another school in my post, and I'm going to brag about this particular principal because, when it's negative, you stay anonymous, but when it's positive, you say the names. On the other end of the spectrum, you have someone like Debbie Broadnax at Powder Springs Elementary. Implement Parent Academy, communicate in 3 or more ways. Academic parent teacher teams called WIGS. Let me tell you what WIGS night is at Powder Springs Elementary. Debbie Broadnax has constructed a way to go over data, school data, wonkish stuff, and get all those parents out. So we got one school in my post, principal or whoever, hey, just put something. I don't care what you put. Just because they told us to put it on there. And you have another school. So my ask or question would be this. For the school strategic plans that will be released, I think they're due on June 30th, can we make sure that the schools who can do much better in terms of what the putting meat on the bones and the objectives of parent engagement involvement, that they actually do that? Because unfortunately, Debbie Broadnax is the anomaly. Most of them just put cups. Because what I did was I looked at, okay, what did you put for your school strategic plan in 2015-16? What did you put in your school strategic plan for 2016-2017? If you weren't getting more people involved doing donuts with dads, why is it still in there for the next year? Or what are you going to change about it? What are you going to modify about it? Those things are not being written in the school strategic plan, which lets me know that there's room, drastic room to grow in terms of what these schools are putting in place in their school strategic plans around engagement and involvement, because I'm following it like a hawk. If you say you're going to do it, I'm going to see how you did it, and I want to see how much it grew. Or are you just trying to check a box? So I guess, again, my question would be, is there an avenue to make sure that on the third, I think it's the third bullet on all the school strategic plans, that they beef up and have real metrics, because we have far too many schools right now, guys, that's just putting advanced ed survey. And I just feel like that's unacceptable. So that's what my question is about parental engagement and involvement.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Ms. Thayer?
Several things. I wholeheartedly agree with you, Mr. Morgan, that the element that our schools are missing in many schools is parental involvement. We cannot effectively educate students without parents. And that is the bottom line. Where we have low test scores, it's generally because of lack of involvement with the home. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. I also think it's a very sad day that schools are having to take on parenting and telling parents, you need to parent. And it used to be the home and the home and the school that worked together to educate students. And now we're having to be the home and the school. And to put that on schools is a real disservice to schools. And then the state legislature and everybody else says, what's wrong with our schools? You know, when we're trying to have to tell parents, you need to be a parent. So I find this very frustrating, but I agree that we can't do it without having some kind of home foundation. But I think instead of you're trying to monitor plans, what you're talking about needs to be our area assistant superintendents. I don't think that's a point that the school board needs to do. It's already a policy in place, and it just needs to be followed through, I believe. We've already done what we said we needed to do, but now it needs to have some teeth in it, I guess. But again, I think it's just a sad state that it has to be done in the first place. So those are my comments.
All right, thank you, Ms. Thayer. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Morgan?
See, the reason I'm so vigilant is in listening to my colleagues' state comments, Ms. Thayer, is I remember what Powder Springs Elementary was before Debbie Broadnax got there in terms of involvement. And it was, we can't get these parents to come out. And now, as I said, I went to the art integration night that they had. Art everywhere, parents everywhere, food everywhere. And she invited me to the WIGS night this particular year. I didn't make it. So again, my question is this. And to your point, Ms. Thayer, I am just following what they put on the paper. I'm not telling them what they should or should not. But what I'm saying is that I want to get to a place where if it's uncomfortable to write just some gibberish about data and how you're going to use data, it should be just as unacceptable to write gibberish about how you're going to engage and involve parents, because it is wholly unacceptable. And, you know, Powder Springs Elementary is predominantly, you know, African-American and Spanish-speaking children. So, and when I went in that building, man, I mean, I saw it firsthand, and it was a beautiful sight. These children excited, these parents excited, and what she's constructed into the culture, I just think it can be universally. I think it can be embedded, whether it's Powder Springs Elementary or Jane Doe Middle School. And especially, one other point I would like to make, especially when that transition from middle school to high. When, unfortunately, too many parents put it on cruise control. I think my hope is that when these plans come out, SSP plans come out on the 30th, at least in my post, that I see some better plans out of those particular areas, because right now those plans are lacking when it comes to engagement, involvement. And again, I will just ask the question or get the feedback. Will we be able to, in these school strategic plans, be able to, across the board, where we're lacking? Because some schools doing some great stuff. I'm not talking about those schools. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm talking about the schools that not doing what they should do. Will we be able to beef up those plans and they know that, hey, I'm watching. Like, I'm not just sitting there. This ain't no feel-good stuff to me. Will we be able to do that for the plans coming up in probably, what, less than, I guess, 3 weeks' time, maybe? That's my question.
So, a couple of things. One, to your point, Ms. Thayer, yes, the level assistance, it's their charge. They supervise the principal. So the short answer to that is yes. We will be, and to you, Mr. Morgan, as well, we will be monitoring those plans and working with those. Now, let me go back and just clarify, because we want to make sure I'm straight, too, before I misstate something. When we changed the policy, it was right at the time schools were submitting their school strategic plan for that coming up year. So I think, Mr. Morgan, to some level of defense, it's very possible that what you're seeing on the web in the school strategic plans is the first iteration of the presence of that section in the strategic plan. So, and while I don't defend checking boxes, because there is a direct correlation between parent involvement and a student's performance academically. And we take that very seriously. That's why we exist, is to improve academic achievement. So I will say, yes, that we will be monitoring those strategic plans, and we will be trying to copy best practices. Again, one size does not fit all, and what works at one school might not work at another school. And to your example, Debbie Broadnax does an awesome job at Powder Springs Elementary. The vehicle that we use to allow that to happen is our L&L meetings. So when we have sessions and breakout sessions, those kind of things, that's where we will allow principals to see best practices, use, for example, Debbie Broadnax as an example, use principals that are getting it done and seeing a high level of ROI on those plans, because kind of to counter your point, you could have a greatly written plan and have in the red ROI, right? So we want to make sure that we do balance what's in the plan, what's in action, more importantly, the results that we're seeing from those actions. So yes, we do take that very seriously. And we always want to do what's going to produce the greatest amount of academic achievement. And again, that's going to vary by all schools. So the short answer is yes, we do take it seriously. We'll monitor it. And to Ms. Thayer's point, the level of assistant superintendents will be very actively involved in that process.
One other quick thing, appreciate it, Mr. Chair. Should I expect all the plans to be on the websites on the 30th? Like, or is there a lapse type thing when they get it up, or will all of them be on there? Because last year for me, it was like herding cats, trying to figure out when they was gonna get it up there.
You know, the strategic planning process is a very popular event, as you can imagine. You know, everybody looks forward to that process, but they are due June 30th. So it's very possible that it will be, you know, a few days, but we'll update the board as soon as all strategic plans have been updated. So you'll know that all of them are there, and then we'll see what that time delay is from the day that they're due to the day that they're uploaded.
Cool. Yep.
Okay. Mr. Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few questions about this subject. We need to come up with some way of emphasizing to the parents that we have issues with about being participants in the school as to why you should be, as a parent, you should be participating with your student in a school. Another question would be, do we have minimum items that have to be in a strategic plan? I don't know. Do we have minimums that these have to be in there and then you could add on to it? Another question is, how involved is the school council involved in developing these strategic plans over and above what our minimums are? And another question is, okay, why don't we have a verification model similar to what we do with the STEM certification, where a school has to meet certain criteria that's given to that school in order to be certified? I don't see any reason why the administration can't review each strategic plan, and at the end of the year, you know, how well did you meet those requirements? Let's do some reporting on that. Let's see, okay, every school has one. How well did you do? And we don't know that right now.
That's what the results will be that are due June 30th, because again, the strategic planning process is an annual process. And that is the purpose of the strategic plan, is to put in places methodologies, policies, procedures that are going to produce results. Now, that being said, there is a template for the strategic plan and things that are required, just like in the policy that the board modified to require each school shall have a parental involvement / parental engagement section in their strategic plan. That means that's not an option. So that is a requirement, and there is a template for that. That being said, though, I would be the first one to say, and again, I've already said it, but what works tremendously at one school may not work at all at another school. And to be quite honest, some schools don't have to put forth a great deal of effort to have parental involvement. That's just the nature of the parents of that particular school. And there again, that's why literally in this district, we run the spectrum of schools with very low parental involvement and schools with very high parental involvement, and that's without doing anything. So what the schools do put into action to increase that level of parental involvement, again, I'm going to compare it to the early literacy proof of concept we're doing. Okay, the 6 schools that we have, the majority of students needed that early intervention in an extreme fashion. There are schools in our district that do not need the majority of the students to have that extreme level of intervention. Same thing with parental involvement. There are schools where the majority of the students need an increased parental involvement engagement strategy. There are other schools where it's happening. But there are still students in every school that need that extreme intervention for early literacy. Every school has the need for parental involvement engagement to increase for some students. So that being said, again, the differences in what's going to bring about ROI is going to differ drastically by school. And it's unfortunate because that means that you have schools that need a very large amount of improvement in parental engagement and involvement. That's unfortunate, but it's reality. So just like with academic achievement, we have to have different strategies as a district to improve academic achievement. We have to have different strategies at each school to improve parental involvement and engagement. And to your point, Susan, about schools having to become the home and the school, you're exactly right. But we also have to weigh, and I'm not saying this isn't, but I'm just drawing the correlation between what we do under the roof of a school has to directly correlate to improved and increased academic achievement, because that's why we exist. And so, again, in some schools, having a breakfast program drastically improves academic achievement in that school, because if you didn't have that program, there would be students hungry until lunch. And if a student is hungry, they're not going to learn, and therefore academic achievement is not going to increase. So that being said, in a school such as that, a breakfast program is very important. Is a breakfast program important at every school for the majority of students? No. But there are probably some students at every single school that would benefit from a breakfast program. You just have to be able to know that and know that that different level is going to exist in different schools. So it's a difficult task. I mean, I kind of make light of, the strategic planning process because I know we all like doing that. Just kidding. We don't. But it's kind of like paying your taxes. You got to do it. We don't have to like it, but you got to do it. The strategic planning process, though, should bring about positive change. If it's just about dotting I's, crossing T's, and checking boxes, well, it's just going to be a stale document that sits on the shelf. And probably if we didn't call it strategic plan, it would probably get a lot more positive connotations surrounding that. But it is what it is. So all of that to say that parental involvement and engagement we do take very seriously. And we are in the process of working with those schools, Mr. Morgan specifically. If you'll let us know, what you're seeing, because again, board members, when you're focused on something in your schools, you may see something that we don't necessarily see, that our level of assistance, for example, at the high schools, each one of them has 8 high schools to manage. So it's very easy for something maybe that you see that we don't necessarily see in the same time frame. So please let us know, and we'll be glad to intervene on that behalf.
Okay, well, let me restate what I said originally when I brought this issue up, is that we need to find a method of conveying to these parents why it's so important for them to be involved, because we're dealing, particularly in the elementary school, we're dealing with students who are going to be our future. They're going to be our future leaders. And so the earlier we start their academic process at a high level, the better off our future is going to be. Won't be my future, but their future and their parents' future. They're the ones that are going to be out there. And we've got to make sure that these parents understand what the requirement in the workforce is going to be and why it's so important for them to be involved in this process, so that when their child gets out of high school or college, whichever one, that they understand that they need to make a living. They need a skill, or they need some education for whatever. So to Mr. Morgan's point, it is extremely important that the parents be involved. In my post, I don't really have that issue. Parents are very strongly involved in what's going on in their child's life. However, I do see a problem occasionally where there's a request by a principal or whoever to bring parents together to talk about a particular issue or whatever. A small percentage of them show up. Out of 2,000 or 3,000 students, you should have about 4,000 parents. But then when only 200 parents show up, was there not a lack of interest? So that happens in even the best schools, where the parents they're selective in their involvement. So we've got to, I would say, kind of create the environment or the situation why it's important for the parents to be involved, not just in selective areas, but all areas of what's going on in the school, and fully understand that, how that's affecting their student. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Mr. Scamahorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Morgan, for bringing it up. And it's a continual conversation, and I wish any one of us had the answer. But let me be a little bit of a contrarian here. Communication is a two-way street. Our teachers are pretty well taxed now with a full plate. And Mr. Ragsdale made a good point for us to bring up things that we see. One of the things, and it's probably anecdotal on my part, but it's one of my trends as far as high school parents, is that my child's 10 weeks, 12 weeks into a subject, and they've not been notified their child's has been struggling. Okay, well, I remember high school, even at my age, I'm not going home to tell my dad that I'm struggling in a subject. Okay, and to Mr. Morgan's point too, where it tends to fade at the high school level. Well, I can give you a good example in a tangible way. For those of us that had elementary school or kids in elementary, they want you to come almost every week to have lunch with them, okay? And there are some that cry when their parents don't come, so you have to double up. That happened to me numerous times. That fades out during middle school, and it is non-existent in high school because the students are growing up and they don't want to be, if I use the term, mothered or what looked over like that. That's why nobody goes to high school and have lunch with their kids. So my point being is there are extenuating circumstances that we have to look at and overcome too. I'm not trying to throw water on it because I support the thing, but we have to figure out how we can get the teachers the time that they maybe need to communicate. So I'll leave it at that. There's some other things, but and it is an evolutionary thing that I'm glad we're working on trying to get to. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ms. Thayer.
I hate to be cynical too, but we call those report cards. And we call those issuing report card dates. Sometimes it's parents put these dates on your calendar and expect them. And if you don't get them, then you should ask. That again is the frustration of parents need to step up and understand that if you have a child, you have some responsibilities here. Now again, I as a principal, I expected teachers to still call and let parents know if there was a problem. But again, on the other side, parents need to know when we are sending those grades home. So it's just, you started out saying teachers have too much to do, and you're exactly right. we have to rely on parents understanding too that they have their responsibilities in some of this too. And at middle and high school, that's where, parents, if you're not going to be involved and be present in the school, then you need to know when report cards go home,
Mr. Banks?
I've got another question about do all teachers have blogs available to them for communications with the parents?
Well, communication on a blog is somewhat can be one way. But yes, all teachers have access to a blog. Now, that technologically, we're working to streamline that because unfortunately, if it's just left up to teachers are going to use what they like. And so for a parent, you don't want to have a parent that has a student in high school and have 7 different types of blogs that you have to access to see communication from a teacher. I will say that teachers are actively using blogs to communicate, and we're working to help streamline that. So the short answer is yes.
Well, my next question would be, do we have any kind of data that says how active these blogs are from a parent standpoint?
No, not from a parent standpoint. That'd be impossible to task that. I mean, you could, from a blog, you could track how many hits, but not from whom, unless you had a login type of environment. Now, not to chase a rabbit down the rabbit hole, but we are working, as you know, with CTLS, we'll be doing a report to the board on the progression that we were making with CTLS, because we are going in different directions. Truly, no other district is doing what we're doing with this type of application marriage. And that is, we're going to have a CTLS student, a CTLS parent, a CTLS assess. So there's going to be different sections of CTLS. We're working very hard to make sure that this next year we do have CTLS parent at least initially accessible for parents, so that they will have one place to start centrally for the district to be able to see data on their particular student and or students. So we are working toward that to where it would be a login, so you could, tell how actively parents are being in looking at the access that we provide.
Don't we have an application that parents use to see what level their students are at,
Right, just the electronic grade book access, which shows grade and attendance information. But what we're talking about with CTLS will go much broader and much deeper to provide truly a portal experience for the parents to be able to tell, number one, the standards that are being required to be taught in classrooms, because a lot of parents, quite honestly, used the Picasso, which is absolutely, if there's ever been an application we have that can be termed legacy application, it was Picasso. And so that we have rolled that content into the new CTLS. And so that's the reason we're working hard to make CTLS parent accessible, at least at a high level this year, because there were a lot of parents that went and utilized Picasso to see the materials that we provided on there. And we're going to take that to the next level with CTLS parent.
So this is something that in the future, we will be able to get out to the parents so that they can get more engaged, like Mr. Morgan's asking some of these parents to get more engaged, and it's easy to get engaged. And I think probably most homes have a computer or iPhone or iPad or something. They have some kind of communication device that they can see all this information if they want to.
Right.
Our problem is encouraging them to do so.
Well, and also making the data and information they have access to real and relevant. And so CTLS parent, what we're going to strive toward, and this is, so I'm going way down the road, so don't think this is, next week. It's going to take us a minute to get here. But ultimately, having the parent be able to access their students' information online and then be able to have a, for lack of a better term, a homework help kind of connection that shows the parent some things and resources to do in order to help their student who is not grasping the standard 10.2.3.6, which is X, and here's some resources to help you work with your student to help them come to mastery of that standard. So yes, we're working toward that. Again, you know, there's always press about what schools and school districts are doing and these kind of things. And it's generally drilled down to one type of benefit that they are focusing on. We're truly focusing on the big picture of the student's K-12 career while they're in Cobb County School District. So we're trying to make it relevant and real for the parent and the student. And most importantly, provide the data and the tools to the teachers that they need to do what we're all talking about, which is improving academic achievement.
Well, one of the concerns I keep hearing about our employment rate, talk about they have millions of jobs available, but we don't have qualified or skilled employees to fill those jobs. Somebody's falling down somewhere along the line. I just want to make sure Cobb County is not behind.
Well, and let me take advantage of you opening that door to stick my foot in it. And you're right, because you're right in what you say. Everybody has to have a dog in this fight for making our employment force better. Let me argue the flip side of that, though. There's too many people out there running around saying that K-12 somehow is to blame for the lack of qualified employees. Well, here's a thought. How many jobs do we have out there that only require a high school education?
Millions.
Not anymore. You've got to have some type of certification past a high school education to be employed, even in construction. You can no longer drop out of school, and as long as you can sling a hammer, go get a job and work your way up in a construction company. So you know, it's just really frustrating that everybody seems to, number one, in this day and age, want to blame somebody for their problems.
Amen.
But number two, and most importantly, blame K-12 because somehow we don't have employees that are capable of holding jobs or qualifying for jobs. So it's a two-way street. And that's why we are looking for IE squared. Gives us the ability to waive certification so that we can go out and get industry experts to come in and teach classes where before they would have to go through at least a 2-year program to be certified before they can even teach in a classroom. So that's a benefit. But it's also a two-way street. Companies have to be willing to work with not just K-12, but higher ed. Because, again, it's not that everybody has to go and get a bachelor's degree to be a construction worker. That's not what's being said. But you do have to have some type of certification past high school, whether it's a certificated program through vocational school, whether it's a 2-year program from a technical school. That's why we have increased drastically our partnership with Chat Tech. Whereas we started out very minimally with about 300 or so students in dual enrollment with Chat Tech. We're now over 1,000, and we've committed to them that we want to be to 3,000. So that's what we're doing. That's what Chat Tech is doing, working with us as partners. But it also takes, you know, there's a third leg on this stool, and that's the business community. And they have to be at the table and understand the overall big picture, because again, it's kind of like when we're talking about the Career Academy. A lot of people out there think that somehow we can build this building and automatically this is going to solve the problems of businesses in Cobb County. And realistically, that's just not the case. Even if we graduated 1,000 students from that school, which we don't graduate 1,000 students from any high school today, that still wouldn't be the case. But it also has to be understood that even though we have all of these waivers for IE squared, for example, we still have to teach and meet the standards and requirements required by the state of Georgia. So it's one of these things where we have an opportunity because people are interested in helping students become better employees. But it's our job to also make sure that we are educating the business community and the community of parents on what is different today. Why is it not the same as when, quote unquote, well, when I was in high school? You know, it's totally different today. And you can say that whether it was last year you graduated or whether it was 30 years ago that you graduated or longer. So it truly is a team effort. So our mission statement is very accurate for us. But again, it's one of those things where there's not a silver bullet out there. So we want to take every opportunity we can to present to the board things like CTLS that we're doing to get to the big picture of getting down to the individualized student, because that's where we are today. If there was one thing that I could point to that's drastically different today than it was 5, 10 years ago, is the importance of getting down to the individual student level. A teacher can no longer expect to cover a chapter, a lesson, a standard, give a test, and move on. That's just not the process today. That teacher has to be able to understand where in comprehension the entire class is as a whole and the entire class is individual student. Because to be able to move on doesn't mean, okay, I checked the box, I've covered chapter 1, now Monday we start chapter 2. It's the teacher's responsibility to make sure that the level of comprehension is there and high for each student. So that's one thing that is drastically different today that is at the root of everything we present to the board, is what we're doing to help teachers and equip teachers to be able to get down to that individual student. And I'm not sure how we got on this task, but
Well, let me just say
I'm
that,
going to blame you, Mr. Banks, because you asked the question.
well, and I think the public needs to understand that their first grader, 12 years from now, the world's going to be different. So the public needs to understand that this board and the administration is not looking at the next 5 years, they're looking at the next 20 years. What's the middle of the 21st century going to look like versus what it is today? Because in my day, maybe 4 years, I could fix a car engine. I could change points and I could change spark plugs. Today, it's all computerized and I can raise the hood, but that's as far as I can go. So things have changed tremendously. Machine shops have all changed. It's all numerical. So things have changed so drastically, but the public needs to understand that we're not just stagnant. We're aggressive and we're looking to the future for these students. And they need to understand that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Banks. That was a good discussion. We're getting close to 10 o'clock. I'm thinking, do you want to take a break? 10 minutes would bring us back in here somewhere around 10:05 to 10:10. Does that sound good? So we'll be, all right, 10 o'clock, 6 minutes? 10:05. All right, so we'll be in recess till 10:05. All right, thank you. And we are back. And Mr. Ragsdale.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the board, agenda item number 1 is the recommendation for authorization of school properties disposal per district administrative rule DO-R. And that list has been sent to the board electronically. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, no questions. All right, without objection, it goes on consent.
All right, for the next two items, going to ask John Adams to come and bring those.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Agenda item number 2, recommendation for approval of the Georgia Department of Education Capital Outlay Project closeout for various schools. As you're aware, we submit initial applications to the DOE for capital project reimbursement, and then they eventually pay us for 90% of that, but they do a 10% holdback until all of the projects are completely finished, essentially until there are no claims whatsoever. All the work has been done, and we've done all the I dotting and the T crossing, and then they reimburse us for the final 10% of those projects at the very end. It's time for us to get reimbursed by them for the final 10% of the projects at McEachern, Campbell, and Fry listed below. We should receive the amounts you see there, just over $151,000 for McEachern project, just over $83,000 for the Campbell project, and just over $72,000 for the Fry project, for a total of about $308,000. And that should complete the capital outlay project closeouts for those 3 schools. So we're recommending that you adopt the certificate of resolution, have it executed by the superintendent and the board chair, and then we'll submit it to the state DOE to get our final payments in those amounts for those 3 projects.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adams. Any questions? Mr. Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On McEachern High School, was this facility, was this paid by the foundation, or did Splash pay for it?
No, I think this was us. It was a $12.7 million project. It's a long list, but the very short version is a lot of HVAC and some fire alarm replacement, clock replacement, but a widespread HVAC replacement. We anticipate getting a total of 1.5 back, and this is the remaining 151. That's the biggest of the 3, obviously.
Okay. I know we had this discussion probably several years ago, but if the foundation does provide for a facility or capital outlay, we still can get reimbursements from it. Is that correct?
Let me double check and get on that for you to give you an exact
I
answer.
think we can, but I can't remember
I
for
think you are
sure.
correct too, but I'll double check on that.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Thayer?
Okay, so am I correct that then these funds go into the, would return to the SPLOST fund? Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's above what we had presented today, so that adds to that fund?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, without objection, this goes on consent. All right. Okay, next.
And then agenda item number 3, recommendation for approval of an intergovernmental agreement between the Board of Commissioners and the school district for roadway improvements at 2 schools. The Board of Commissioners, as part of their SPLOS program, is going to undertake 2 roadway improvements near 2 of our schools, Cheatham Hill and North Cobb. At Cheatham Hill, they're going to be putting in a roundabout very near to the school, and you see the location depicted on the aerial map we've provided. To maximize economy of scale, as we've done a few times in the past, we are going to take that opportunity using their contractors, for which we will reimburse them when the work is done, to improve ingress and egress at the Cheatham Hill location. We're going to modify the main school driveway by creating a raised concrete island to make better right turns for traffic entering and exiting Cheatham Hill, and also adding a turn lane into the school entrance. We think that'll enhance motorist sight distance and make it even safer to exit the school, and also make it safer for pedestrians. And the DOT is doing, of course, the lion's share of the work. In that case, it's going to be a $2 million project, and the amount we will reimburse them is just under $24,000. Similarly, at North Cobb High School, you can see on the map provided that they're improving the box, as they're calling it now, at the intersection near the school, the intersection there with Blue Springs, doing some work to improve the box. And in that case, we're going to reimburse them just over $18,000 to improve traffic ingress to North Cobb at the westernmost driveway, essentially changing a right turn only exit drive to a channelized raised concrete island, and adding a left turn lane into the driveway. So we're going to use some economy of scale while they're out there, reimburse them as we've done in the past. We work very well with the county's DOT folks to try to improve ingress and egress at those two schools while they're there working nearby.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Now, is this SPLOST money that's going to be used for reimbursement?
Yes, sir.
All right, and Mr. Scamahorn, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Adams, you or Mr. Parker don't have to answer this now unless you just want to or know the answer. But I'm looking at the visual here, the little black speckled lines down both sides of the road, I assume, are sidewalks. I'm pretty sure there's not a sidewalk on what I'll call the top side of that road since it's running horizontal. But I wanted to make sure that in the scope of the work that is in fact going to be a sidewalk, because right now there's a drainage ditch there that's going to have to be not filled in, but culvert or however they do it to put that sidewalk in there. So could we make sure that that's?
Yes, sir, certainly. I'm on the same understanding as you are, that part of the standard spec for any roadway improvement now for the county is that they would add sidewalks whenever they do that. I think they factor that into each project. And my recollection of that is the same as yours. I'll defer to you because you spent more time at North Cobb than I did. But I think you're exactly correct, and that is what they plan to do, but I will verify that for you.
Okay. And then finally, again, as general, you and your staff do great work, but I'd like to commend you for working with the county and, having meetings and working together. And also, I assume it's still as the chair of the Board of Commissioners and the other commissioners are doing, they're trying to work with us to make sure that we're getting efficiency of dollars, if you will, and coordination. So
Yes, sir. It's a well-run county. Having worked for them 7 years myself, and they're great folks to work with, and we're lucky to have great people running both the board and the Board of Commissioners.
Okay. And thanks again, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Scamahorn. Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question on the Cheatham Hill, this concrete egress or whatever it's called. That's not, it is not directly by the entrance to the school. It's actually down the road farther, correct?
What I
According to
have
this
is
map?
that we are going to modify the main school driveway by creating a channelized raised concrete islands, essentially channeling right turns to exit, essentially segregating, if you will, the traffic, so you have to physically make a right turn, so you can't turn left in what's going to be a little bit more problematic if we allowed that. So this would physically force cars to turn right out of the school and then also allow for a dedicated left turn lane into the school entrance. Instead of people coming to there and having the option to do what's going to be a little more problematic, it would force them to turn right. And the DOT has studied this and assured us that that will make it even safer to enter and leave the school.
But that's not on this
I
drawing.
don't know that you can see it that clearly on the aerial map, but we also have some text description from them that we've
So
agreed
when
to
you leave
perform.
Cheatham Hill, you will have to turn right and go down to the roundabout and then go roundabout and then come back the other way?
That's what you just said.
Yeah,
I guess the traffic studies have been done that there's not enough that will bottleneck that.
you can
That
see
area.
the yellow area in the center with the cross-hatched lines in the center of the road. It looks like that is intended, I'm speaking for the DOT at this point, but that's intended to make people turn right so that people can't turn left there. And the intent would be that they go down and either funnel further south down John Ward or turn right onto Irwin or use the roundabout to come back around.
That it looks like a third lane, though, Mr. Adams, pardon me, Mr. Chair and Mr. Wheeler. But looking at it, there's two yellow lines on our visual, and I don't see any yellow cross-hatching, but it may be there. But it looks like there's going to be a center left-hand turn and then a right turn lane only. So if that's not the case.
We'll
then-
get you some more detail on it.
And Mr. Wheeler just trying to help, so excuse me.
Okay, any other questions, discussion? Speaking of discussion, since this involves SPOS dollars, without objection, this goes on the discussion agenda. All right, next.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm going to ask Mary Elizabeth Davis to come up and introduce and kind of explain agenda item number 4, and also Darrell York will be present for any questions as well.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent. Agenda item number 4 is the recommendation for adoption to revisions of Administrative Rule IHE-R, which is our promotion and retention rule. And I bring some context to this conversation because historically, this particular administrative rule had heavily relied on alignment to the state board rule for promotion and retention, which actually factored in the Georgia Milestones assessment results as a key determinant of a student's placement following the completion of an academic year. Over the past 2 years, the State Board of Education has waived their own rule regarding the use of the Georgia Milestones results as a determinant for placement. And our IE squared amendment submitted to the State Board this past winter has now, moving forward, waived the use of Georgia Milestones as a single determinant for student placement following an academic year. As a result, refinements to our own administrative rule for promotion and retention have been created, and they've been created first and foremost to compensate for the elimination of milestones as the automatic determinant of student placement. Instead, milestones is now one of many consistently used data points to determine a student's readiness to advance to the next grade level. Accompanying this particular administrative rule, I want to assure the board that there have been district processes that have been created to bring systematic consistency to promotion and retention decisions made from school to school, and no longer relying heavily on principal determination, but a collection of systematic data points that are created. In particular, there is now a grade level performance matrix that consistently communicates to schools the January performance expectations and the May performance expectations. And for example, if I look at the second grade matrix, not only does it include report card grades, but also the reading inventory, Lexile metrics, Funtus and Pinnell results, the DRA results, reading fluency, and a math inventory quantile. At grades 3, 5, and 7, it also includes Iowa results. I say that because now that we have systematic tools schools can use to determine student performance, we now have a systematic matrix that allows those data points to create a round picture of our students' readiness to be promoted. I also think it's important to bring to your attention that we have a timeline now established for consistent parent communication regarding academic concerns. And that starts with an academic alert letter in October, November, should in those early months a student be demonstrating lacking proficiency. It then is a January retention concern letter, in April a retention alert letter, and in June a retention decision letter. Again, increasing the systematic approach schools take to communicating and making decisions about the placement of children from year to year. Finally, before I turn it over to Mr. York, I want to emphasize the role that both principals and teachers have played in the development of these tools so that there has been great communication and involvement and feedback sessions for contributors to the final version of how we view a student's readiness to advance to the next grade level. At this point, that concludes the context I prepared to provide. Mr. York, do you have anything you want to add?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Superintendent, members of the board, the agenda item is actually regarding the policy IHE, which is a complement to the administrative rule that will actually come up later. So these two are being brought to you in different timelines because of the way we do business, but the IHE is actually a complement to the administrative rule. One note, Mr. Sweeney was able to point out in some of the editing, there was a singular plural error in section 4. We'll clean that up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. York. Dr. Davis, any questions here? Comments? Mr. Morgan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's very good to hear that there's a systematic approach to promotion and retention. And with the grade level performance matrix rather. So this is a swath or a spectrum of considerations for this a particular child's promotion and retention. And with the communication that has significantly increased, have we noticed any variations in terms of promotion and retention? Like, have we seen a significant, not significant, have we seen, whether it's incremental or significant increases in promotion and or retention since we have obviously improved our processes around this particular issue?
So, Mr. Morgan, thank you for the question. We will be moving into this coming year utilizing a board-adopted rule adjustment and then the processes behind it, so I could better articulate that moving into next year.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Okay, I believe this can go on the consent without objection. All right. Okay.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, item number 7 is for action today. I know it's a little bit out of the ordinary, but we did take a little bit more time in creating the budget and making sure we had ample time with the board to discuss that. So I'm going to ask Brad Johnson to come forward and have any remaining discussion that needs to take place about the budget.
Good morning, Board. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the Board, Mr. Superintendent. Action item number 1 is a recommendation for final approval of the 2018 budget today on June 14th. On April 20th, the tentative budget was presented to the Board for your consideration. In this meeting, we reviewed the budget calendar so that you would know all the events in the budget development process leading up to final approval. On this date, you also received a budget executive summary of the budget along with a detailed notebook of the budget, which contains detailed calculations on how all accounts were prepared and all the assumptions used in preparing the numbers. I really think that our budget documentation is probably some of the most extensive in the country. I really do, as I've reviewed other school districts. A detailed budget report as well as a summary of the other funds in the budget was included in the notebook for your review. Since then, this information has been available on the school district main website to give the public the opportunity to review budget figures. On May 10th, the board conducted the first public hearing and also approved the 2018 tentative budget, which allowed financial services to advertise the budget for review by Cobb County citizens and the board. Today, on June 14th, the board conducted the second budget public hearing this morning to give Cobb citizens an opportunity for budget input. Administration is recommending that the board vote and approve the 2018 budget in final form today. Mr. Chairman, that is my presentation today, and I am available for questions regarding the FY 2018 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. All right, Ms. Thayer.
I move that we accept the budget.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Scamahorn seconded. We have motion second. Further discussion. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One quick question that I do have, Brad, is what's the allotment for this year's, a proposed allotment for this year's summer bridge program?
Summer Bridge Program is included in this budget, and it's $100,000.
$100,000, okay. And am I correct in saying, kind of pinging over to Mary Elizabeth?
Might need to.
Right. I can ask you if you want me to. That we will have a revamped metric in terms of how we are gauging the effectiveness of these programs. Am I correct?
Yes, sir, you are correct. In the application this year for schools to pursue access to those funds, they also had to design an analysis of how student performance will be measured compared to non-participating students. So yes, sir, per your vision for that.
Okay, I appreciate it. Follow up, Mr. Chair? I guess this question would, the superintendent, with your permission, I'd like to ask John Adams a
What kind
question.
of question is it?
Don't ask him. You don't trust me, bro? Trust me, bro. I want to ask, with the budget, Mr. Adams, one of the things that I want the district to continue, and I think all of us put words in people's mouths, is how do we always factor in, and how do we reward teachers in our school district? So my question to you would be, first question would be, last year we took the step of allotting $500 to every teacher of the year and classified employee, right? I think the initial goal was 1,000, but we landed at 500. But my question to you would be, if we did indeed push it up to $1,000 for every teacher of the year, classified employee, from your vantage point, is that feasible, plausible? What does that look like if we wanted to knock it up to 1,000 for every teacher of the year and classified employee in this particular budget?
And I know, Mr. Morgan, you and I, in addition to agreeing on tired sports cliches, we're also in agreement on, I'm comfortable with being accused of being too aggressive in rewarding great employees. That I can live with that. To answer your question directly, I think we can do that. That would mean going from 500 each to 1,000 each. It would mean, Brad, stop me if I'm wrong, but an additional 114,000. It just so happens we have recently renegotiated, if you will, through our benefits broker, the district's benefits package. As you know, we're a large district, so we have a lot of economies of scale, and we're able to often negotiate even better prices on things. And I think we have found enough money in savings to the employer side of that to cover that expense. So I think if the superintendent wanted us to pursue that would be something that we could do that would be budget neutral and not cause Mr. Johnson to grab his chest.
With that bit of information, I would like to, amend the motion. Amend the motion to increase teacher of the year and certified employees, well, it's not a bone, I mean reward, or whatever we want to call it, to $1,000 for the 2017-2018 school budget.
All right, so a motion to amend the motion. Do I hear a second? Mr. Scamahorn seconds. Any further discussion? Okay, I saw Ms. Thayer's hand, and then Mr. Banks.
I just had a question. Chris, is this a recommendation that you would make?
Well, I wasn't sure how I needed to weigh in on this. So the one correction I'll make is the term budget neutral. I think that because the board is taking action, that it's not my action to take. So I have absolutely no problem with that. Because again, we brought up the concept last year of rewarding the teacher of the year and classified employee of the year. So I definitely support it, but I don't want to use the term budget neutral because this is a budget enhancement that the board is considering per Mr. Morgan's motion. I absolutely support that because we have realized savings that will allow us to do that without having to cut into any other budget. So while conceptually true, it's budget neutral, because the way the board is taking action, I want to call it a budget enhancement rather than budget neutral, because it is enhancing the program that we put into inception last year of $500. So I absolutely support it. Because again, it's not a huge amount of money, and we all know, and you've all heard me say, that I wish we could do more than we're doing in this budget for all of the employees. But being able to enhance that for the Classified Employee of the Year and Teacher of the Year is definitely a plus, because I think it's been a long time coming for us to be able to do something like that, to recognize them. So to answer your question, Ms. Thayer, I absolutely support that.
One of the reasons I was asking was, Mr. Morgan and I kind of mentioned this in a conversation earlier, and after that, I did think about that Alice Stouter and I were talking at one point, and she had mentioned to me a need for a literacy coach through the literacy team, needing someone to help coach the teachers and principals along with that. I think you mentioned some need for something like that, but we didn't have the money for a position like that. And you know, the literacy teams are so important in our areas, and that would certainly cover that salary. So I just was kind of wondering if it was the highest and best use of our
Okay,
monies.
so I think what we would have to do here is we have a motion, and Mr. Banks hasn't spoken yet, I know, I'm going to get to him. But we would have to vote against for or against Mr. Morgan's
That's
motion, and then you would need to make another motion, is how that would work. Mr. Parliamentarian, am I correct in that? So that information has been thrown out there. Mr. Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Morgan, are we talking about 2,000 per school? Because you're talking about, 1,000 for the classified and non-class, and certified. So we're talking about $228,000 of expenditure addition to the current budget.
No, not total addition, because remember, we're already doing 500. So it would be an increase of 114,000, give or take.
Okay, so the 500 is already in the budget.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
So we're adding another 114,000 to the budget
Yes, sir.
in addition. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wheeler?
I've got another one to throw in there, too. Is this a recurring cost issue? If we incur budget things, is it a reality that in 2 years from now, this may just go back to zero? I mean, or is this sustainable?
When we put this in place, that was a discussion that we had prior to doing the $500 last year, because, again, I didn't want to put something in place that was not sustainable, to your point. We did realize the savings, as Mr. Adams described, and that savings is recurring. So that being the case, I do feel comfortable in saying that it would be sustainable.
Well, now, Mr. Morgan in his motion made the motion for the 2017, 2018.
That's correct,
period.
yeah. So it's not a recommendation to do it forever, is to change it in this budget. It would be our expectation that we would have this as an annual item, that we don't want to do it that's why we had the discussion before we brought it to the board last year, because, again, we don't want to do something one time and then all of a sudden next year, we run into problems and can't do that. Now, all of that being said, should we have another economic catastrophe like we had 8-9 years ago, I'm not saying that we will choose to fund that over funding positions, because obviously when you look at the totality of this, it's about 3 teacher positions. But that being said, in the scope of this budget and looking into future budgets, I think this is an absolute right thing to do for the teachers of the year and the classified employees of the year, because, again, it recognizes those that go above and beyond. So I support this moving forward, but I just want to put in there that this is not a never can be revisited kind of topic.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Banks, did we get you done? All right, okay. All right, any other Ms. Thayer?
I don't think we can ever do enough to reward teachers, ever, so I'm certainly for that. But just with that, do you think that our literacy program is okay, or do you think we needed more staff for that?
I mean, you know, I could point to many areas where we need additional staff. I mean, but we just have to prioritize. And at this point in time, I think as far as the early literacy intervention proof of concept, we were able to do that with no new staff, no new resources, no additional expense. Now, that being said, as we roll that up to first grade in those 6 schools and then additional schools later, I don't know the answer to that. I can't answer that right now. I would not say that a need for an additional position affiliated with that proof of concept outweighs the recognition of the Teacher of the Year at this point in time.
But that was my question. Since we're spending money, which was the greater need there? Do we need staff to support a program that we already have in place? Or, I think both are certainly worthy expenditures.
And I don't know that I can, because again, I could point to numerous areas where we do need additional staff. But I think right now that the decision to support an increase of Teacher of the Year and Classified Employee of the Year, because it was my intent last year when we put this into the budget, is to do something that would truly not just be a token for the Classified Employee of the Year and Certified Employee, you know what I'm saying? Teacher of the Year, Classified Employee of the Year. Bumping it to 1,000 does make it significantly better because, let's just be honest, I mean, once you do a $500 something and taxes are taken out and that kind of thing, it very much gets minimized and reduced. So it's totally the board's discretion. I don't know that I can answer your question, though, Ms. Thayer, about saying which would be a greater priority, because I believe that the early literacy program is aptly supported at this point in time. And Mary Elizabeth, jump in anytime you want to.
Mr. Superintendent, the one thing I would add is that fortunately for us, the Title I eligibility of the expense associated with our early literacy instructional model has been a huge advantage. It really has been a commitment of ours that we repurpose the staff that we do have in ways that is incredibly focused on this primary objective. And so while, as you mentioned, additional staff across the organization is a valued add, in this particular model, we have leveraged our Title I funds, our Title I literacy coaches, and the academic coaches that Title I provides in our local schools in order to lead this work.
Okay. Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question. The literacy program was for 6 schools, is that correct? For the past year, are we going to all schools? Are we expanding that for this year, or are we staying with the 6?
We are expanding it to an additional 7 schools. Don't ask me to name those schools because I can't, but I'll be happy to phone a friend. And then the current 6 schools, we're going to be expanding that to first grade. So the 6 schools from this proof of concept, they'll be at kindergarten and first grade for next year.
Okay, but we've already got the money in the budget for the expansions.
Yes and no, because I'm not going to say we don't have the money in the budget. What I'm going to say is we're doing things differently. So there's not an additional cost to what we're doing with the proof of concept.
Well, we're really talking about 2 different budgets. One is Title I and one is the general fund.
That's correct.
So we're taking a good bit of money, or redirecting some money out of the Title I to the list.
Actually, I'm going to say we're not redirecting money. We're taking literacy coaches that are already funded by Title I
okay.
and focusing them on the proof of concept methodology, if you will.
Okay, so we're expanding the expenditure of Title I money for the literacy program. Is that correct? We're spending more money this year for the literacy program out of Title I that we did not spend last year.
I'm going to go ahead and phone a friend and say tag.
Mr. Reisel, I think you've got it. We have historically funded literacy coaches for our Title I schools out of our Title I budget that serve all Title I schools. And we are now repurposing their role to be intensely focused on this literacy instructional model. We have also historically allowed schools the opportunity to fund an academic coach out of their allocation of Title I dollars at their local school. We are now redefining and systematically structuring the role of that local school academic coach for the purpose of this intensive literacy model. So I think we could caution our organization from referring to this as a program. It's really not a purchased program requiring additional funds. It is a focused instructional approach that is requiring a lot of adults to just rethink how their jobs function, focused on a singular outcome.
Another curiosity question. What determines our Title I funding?
So Title I is a flow-through grant coming from the federal government. So the legislative process at the U.S. Congress is the initiating factor for our flow-through funding. But we then are recipients through the state DOE based on our percentage of students that are qualifying for free and reduced lunch. And we have about 45 of our schools that are then meeting a certain threshold of percentage of students. Currently, it's 55% of students who meet the free and reduced lunch category create a school to be eligible for Title I funds. That school then has a student body population that we then would calculate their eligible Title I funds that are allocated to them.
So with our expanding population, student population, our Title I money is increasing each year?
We have actually held pretty steady annually on the amount of Title I dollars that we have received in previous years into this current year. Our fluctuation hasn't been so great that we're seeing a massive increase. We have had 2 new schools eligible, so that did increase our total amount, and one of those schools was a high school. That is a substantial increase, but relative to the overall Title I budget, it's not been amazingly growing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Banks. Mr. Scammahorn, and my public apologies for not catching you the last discussion before the break.
That's okay. You still get cookies and milk after the meeting. So, and Mr. Morgan, you started this, but, I digress. So, Mr. Ragsdale, if I could we get a clarification on the classified employees? Who's competing per school for this money?
Well, the primary group that's always winning is, of course, technology because of the great, I'm just kidding. So it's literally all the classified employees. I mean, literally it can be secretaries, clerks, technology, maintenance, custodian, everybody that is not a certified position. So basically everybody that's not a teacher.
And Ms. Thayer said cafeteria.
Absolutely.
Food
Yeah,
service.
absolutely.
Everybody.
Bus driver, transportation, yeah.
Maintenance. Bus drivers. How does the bus drivers get considered? Because, they're not in really mixing with the school personnel.
There's actually a nomination process that goes out through all divisions. And then those votes are tallied and correct me if I'm wrong, John, I'll go ahead and phone a friend, go ahead and tag.
No, you're right, sir. There's a nomination. There are some minimum criteria, and we've actually loosened up a little bit on that over the more recent years just to make it able for more people to win. But essentially, they're nominated by the school staff, 2 divisions, certified and classified, and as Mr. Ragsdale accurately said, the classified are essentially, if you're not a teacher or an administrator, that you're classified, and then they're elected by their peers at the school. So this is a very important process, and it's a huge honor to be selected not only by your principal as being a good teacher, as a lot of our teachers are, but by your peers. They haven't been involved in the process at the elementary school level in particular, I've seen teachers reduced to tears by winning the award, and just having the extra money, whether it's 500 or 1,000, I think could go a long way towards helping retain our best people.
Yeah, let me add on to that too, because I got to thinking about the things that we do. And generally, as the board members know that come to these events, when we have the retirement luncheon or the certain, classified employee of the year, the teacher of the year, pep rally, and those kind of things. I don't know of another district that does as much as we do to recognize. We do the All-Stars, where that's also a nomination kind of thing of those that go above and beyond. And so let me go back, Ms. Thayer, to answer your question after we've had this discussion and reflecting. I think this is a high priority because I constantly get emails from employees thanking me, which obviously it's not me, and I'm very quick to say that, but for the recognition, the lunches, those kind of things that we do that mean a lot to the employees that are nominated to these positions, because it's not just a fly-by-night kind of thing that people get nominated by their peers, whether it be Teacher of the Year or whether it be Classified Employee of the Year, and to which our Teacher of the Year was in the finalists for the state. They erroneously did not choose our Teacher of the Year for the State Teacher of the Year, but, we'll overlook that for at least 30 seconds. So now that I'm reflecting on it, if we had this discussion, I would say that, yeah, this is a very high priority to increase that. So thanks for all the discussion, too. Not that I'm trying to end it, but this is a good discussion.
Well, just
Mr. Scamhorn.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, again. And thank you for picking up on my question, because and Mr. Adams, the operative word is important, and you said important process. And we have a policy we may not have as far as how this goes in a general sense, or maybe not, a rule.
We have a process. It's not an official board policy,
Okay.
but we have an internal process.
Okay, process. And you answered my question too, as far as what all we do, because I want this to be generally a motivational goal, not something that everybody else is grumbling about. So, and you answered that quite adequately, both of you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious. I think it's a great thing for our certified and classified people, but in fairness and consideration for classified people, I would think if you're a bus driver, a county maintenance guy, a central office staff person, they're really not in the mix. I mean, if you're a nurse, if you're a cafeteria worker, a custodian, you're there every day. I don't know who's determining this. I'm just throwing that out there, that maybe I'm not trying to, I know we got all sorts of money that we can spend here, there, and everywhere, but some of these other places, in consideration for the jobs that they're doing for our district as classified people, I don't think they're maybe getting the same considerations, because nobody's going to see them except the people they work with.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Any other discussion? Okay. Recap, for those of you who've been looking down at your iPhones, we have a motion on the floor to accept the budget, but we have an amendment to the motion, which has evolved into, and Mr. Morgan, you just let me know if there's anything that you want to add to this, but as we understand it, this is a motion from Mr. Morgan that in essence is a budget enhancement to the budget that will raise the bonuses for classified and certified teachers, employees of the year, from $500 to $1,000 for the 2017-2018 school year. Is that the essence? All right, does everybody understand this amendment to the motion? So we've had a motion, a second, we've had discussion. All those in favor of the amendment the essence as stated, please raise your hand. Okay, all right, that's 7-0. Okay, so that was the amendment to the motion. Now, okay, what? All right, all right, now we're back. We've now got the essence added in to the motion to the budget. So, Mr. Sweeney, you have something you'd like to contribute?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Johnson, just a couple of questions. Is the teacher retirement system, is that mandatory or voluntary for teachers?
I understand it's mandatory.
It's mandatory, okay. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that the governor, included in his budget a 2% increase for the state salary schedule. Is that correct?
On the state salary schedule, yes.
Yes. Have we, and I know that the premiums for benefits have increased significantly, as well as the mandatory contribution for the TRS, the teacher retirement system. Do we have any general knowledge about how much of that will eat into that 2% increase for the teachers?
I guess it would. John, do you have an estimate of that?
Yes, and I don't have the exact figure, but you're exactly right. The TRS participation is mandatory, and it's even at some point in the not-too-distant future apparently going to be mandatory again for, on the employer side, for retirees. But it's mandatory, so while they, at the state, have given us 2% raise on the base salary schedule, you're right, Mr. Sweeney, on the other side of that equation, we're seeing about I think it's just slightly over a 4% increase on the employer's required contribution for those same employees. So 4% more for the employers to pay for TRS, $100 a month more for every classified employee's health insurance, and 2% on the base scale for teachers, which for us translates to about 1.5%. So you're on to.
My point being is that we're getting, getting an increase 2% at the state level for the state salary schedule, yet it's arguably a big chunk of that is going to be eaten up by any increases in benefit choices as well as the teacher retirement system. Is that correct? Is that safe to say?
Let me jump in there too, because we're talking about the same thing, but I think, Mr. Sweeney, you're trying to make a point of, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm ill-conceiving.
I'll let you know.
This, but, so the 2% raise on the state salary schedule, the more a teacher makes, the more they contribute to TRS, and it's required. I think that was where you were headed. Now, granted, and the point I wanted to make is the employee portion of TRS is not increasing. So the amount that's required for them to contribute to TRS is not increasing, but it is percentage that I think maxes out at 6%, or it is 6%. So that is not changing. But to your point, Mr. Sweeney, the more you make, the more you contribute up to a certain level. But to John's point and Brad's point, it's very important for us to realize how much money it is costing us. So in just the TRS increase that we're required to pay on the employer side is 12.5, give or take?
In that range.
Okay, so $12.5 million additionally coming out of the general fund budget to pay for the increase. And then also was mentioned the increase in classified health insurance. And remember that this is the third year that has been going up. So the first year, we're at 13 million basically now that's coming out. So just those two items in total is $25 million that's coming out of the budget that did not have to come out of the budget last year.
Yeah, and my point in bringing this, and I agree with everything that you say, and I'm not trying to suggest that, the teachers themselves are paying more into the system, but these decisions are dramatically impacting our budget overall. And I think the headwinds looking forward are going to be pretty significant too. Just this week, there was an article in the AJC that highlighted that the state increase the funding of the teacher retirement system by $223 million. And then there's calls next year for an additional $375 to $400 million on top of the $1.5 billion that's annually spent. Now, the only place that's coming out of is the state budget, and potentially, more harmful to absolute funding for education purposes within our schools. And I'm just trying to bring light to this because it's something that we really got to keep an eye on. We know that our budget is extremely tight, and the need for us to pay attention to what's happening at the state level is going to be very, very important going forward. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To expand on what Mr. Sweeney was talking about as far as the state salary for teachers, our TRS is based on what we actually pay, not what the state level is. Is that correct? So we pay a substantial amount in addition to what the state is allocating. So it's not, you can't take a state number, you got to take the Cobb County number, and that's the percentage of the TRS that we're having to pay. So there's two factors there.
I appreciate you bringing that up too, and let me kind of add to that. And I want to be very careful that this is not misperceived of what I'm trying to get at, because the budget, obviously you guys know this, is very complex. And to your point, Mr. Banks, there's a lot of things that go into the numbers that get presented in the budget that most people don't ever see because of the things that's going on behind the scenes. And behind the scenes meaning like the employer increase of TRS. But let me also say that while there's been a great deal of attention given to the governor giving a 2% raise to the teachers, i.e. to the state salary schedule, I think it's remiss if we don't bring up the fact that our salary schedule is constructed in a manner that if you're eligible for a step increase, that step increase is somewhere minimally 2.5%. So and I may be misstating that, John, is it 1.5? 1.5. Okay, 1.5. So we've had this conversation about, okay, what those employees that are getting a step, what does that equate to? And with the bonus and the step increase, it does get up to 2.5 to 2.6% thereabouts for employees. So, and the reason I made the statement about I don't want this to be misperceived is that I'm not trying to say we're giving a raise. What I'm trying to point out to is, again, we pay 20 to 27% more than the state salary schedule. Okay, so if the state ever comes up and gives an 18% raise, then we're getting close to paying what we pay. But that being said, we still are doing and adhering to the step increases, because I know at one point in time, and this is kind of goes into the TRS employer portion increase, what they're saying, they being TRS, is saying is that when we hit the economic downturn and all of these school districts started doing furlough days, most importantly started doing layoffs, there were less people paying into the system. And so that caused a downward trend in what TRS was receiving as far as being financially sustainable and all that kind of stuff, which is one of the most stable retirement systems in the country. It's very strong, but now that's coming to cost because all of the layoffs and all of those downturns now are requiring us to pay more for the employer portion moving forward. All of that to say, it's still hard for most people to understand how we are not able to give a raise when you look at the county digest growing, the state revenues increasing, the overall economic condition generally trending up, And it's hard for most people to understand why we're in the situation we are, and we've all discussed, you know, what those items are that cause us to be in a different situation. And I'm not going to reiterate those because we have done it time and time again. But I just wanted to say that it is important for us to say, point out the good things. Because back to the, you know, Mr. Morgan's motion, we still do try to do everything we can for the employees, and every employee across the board. So I appreciate the points and appreciate you letting me make that statement.
And, you know, and it's important that the public recognizes that we're, have a strong focus on our teacher retentions, our teacher training, and not only that, but the hiring of highly qualified teachers out of our universities and so forth. Mr. Johnson, what is our QBE contribution for next year? You know, our fair share.
Local share is $144 million.
So that's $144 million that we do not get from the state.
And that's another factor that Chris had alluded to. One of the factors, it incrementally increased this year for next year by $7 million.
And did our austerity cuts stay the same, or did they go up?
They stayed the same, and it'll continue to be an austerity cut for us for $10 million next year.
Okay. Let me reflect a little bit. Back in 2009, 2010, we had a classroom size much smaller than what we have now. If we were able to go back to those classroom sizes, approximately how many teachers would we have to hire to be able to be at the 2009, 2010 classroom level?
Right. I don't have an exact number, but I think it'd be in the range of 800 or 900.
So how much money would that increase the budget by?
Well, 900 times 85,000 per position, and that includes fringes, of course, but it'd be around $75 million.
Okay, and that would just put us back where we were in 2009, 2010. So,
You are correct.
So in this budget, were we able to actually decrease the classroom size on an average?
And that's also not taking into account the numbers, and I know we're speaking anecdotally here, but that from 2009, 2010, that's not taking into account the FTE growth we've experienced in those 7 years. So to get back to that class teacher ratio, student teacher ratio, it probably would be higher than 800 to 900 teachers because of the growth that we've experienced over those years. So even at, like I said, even at 900 teachers, that's $77 million.
Which we don't have.
Exactly.
So I think it's incumbent upon this board to find a way to get some additional revenue so that we can get back to the level we were at in 2009 and 2010.
Let me put it in this perspective too, because when you said that, it got me thinking. So roughly, we're at $1 billion budget, roughly, just for easy numbers, easy math. All right, so 90%, give or take, 90% is probably low, but right at 90% is in personnel. So $900 million is for personnel out of the $1 billion. So that leaves $100 million for everything else in the district. So it would take basically the entire budget to get back to the level of teacher-student ratio that we just discussed. So the money required to get back to there is basically our budget for everything aside from personnel. And that kind of puts it in a different perspective.
So in order to get back to the 2009, 2010 classroom size average, it would take anywhere from $75 to $80 million in additional revenues that we don't have. Just to get back to where we were 9 years ago. You know, we've got a problem.
And also, since we're glass half empty and draining it as every time we comment.
Everybody.
So let me contribute to that. Let me just go ahead and pour the glass out. When you take into account extrapolating out this concept of getting back to 2009, 2010 numbers, then you take into account what it would take to give a raise to every employee if you increased by 900. So now you're up to probably $9.5, $10 million for a 1% raise for every employee, where we're at roughly 8.5 today. So again, let's pour the water out. You know, it's not a great picture that we have for our budget.
In order to get back to that level, we've got a huge challenge ahead of us. And I think, we can do it. We can find ways to do it. But we're putting our students at disadvantage, and we're putting our teachers at a disadvantage by having these above normal classroom sizes, which we should not tolerate. We've got to find some solutions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Banks. Mr. Sweeney?
I just wanted to just pay one more comment relative to the TRS stuff. And Superintendent Ragsdale was right about the contributions that were coming in, because let's say a lot fewer people were paying into the system. But the other thing is that the returns have been less than what they had projected. I mean, I think the target was a 7.5% return, and they're well under those numbers. And it's going to be difficult, because those are dollars funded from 2008, 2009, and losing that growth at the lower rate of return significantly impacts that teacher retirement thing. And I can only see that above and beyond what the state is looking to do, and we've seen this before, is that they're going to put a greater burden on the local systems to increase their contributions going forward, which is going to eat further into our future budgets.
And now that we're totally empty out of the glass of water, John mentioned this, and we really haven't discussed this because it hadn't got a lot of press yet, but there is a move to require employers to pay the TRS portion for retirees that come back to work. Okay, so that being said, that's a significant hit, regardless of what the hit is. And what that's going to do, the unintended consequence, the reasoning behind them wanting to do that is the premise of a retiree is taking a position that a newly graduated teacher could be occupying. That's the premise. And I'm not saying it does or it doesn't hold water, but that's the premise. That being said, what that will do as an unintended consequence, that will cause those teachers that might be eligible to retire and want to retire and then come back 49% possibly to not retire. So that's, that's going to reduce the number of teachers that we have retiring, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a factor that we have got to take into account, because we do have a significant number of retirees that come back to work for 49% that we are not currently having to pay the employer portion of TRS. So with the employer portion of TRS increasing $12.5 million this year, that's on those employees that we're required to pay. Should we be required to pay for 49% employees, that same TRS portion, that's going to come out of the general fund budget, and regardless of how much it is. And do we know how many 49%ers we have? I know it's off the cuff, but.
Ballpark figure, 150 to 200.
Okay, so 150 to 200, and we probably have 10,000 TRS employees, give or take. So not a huge number, but a number nonetheless. That would impact things like the Teacher of the Year bonus going from 500 to 1,000. Those kind of things start to add up when you're having to compare. So, yeah, I mean, I wish I could get up here and say, if we can make it to 2020, we're going to be in great shape. Unfortunately, our revenue issue is not going to change, period. And so we do, so it doesn't exacerbate as bad as it could, because as we continue to grow in students, then that money coming from the state continues to increase based on that FTE, because that's how we're funded with QBE. But that being said, all of the things that we have pointed to, whether it's 62 and over exemption, whether it's local fair share, those things are also increasing. And as we see local fair share increase $7 to $8 million in 1 year from last year to this year, that certainly plays a bigger portion than paying the TRS portion of a 49% for 100 to 150 people. So there is significant challenges ahead for us. I'm not speaking for education in general, but for a Cobb County School District, there are significant financial implications moving forward every single budget year that we're going to have to accommodate. And while we were able to accommodate this change for the classified and the teacher of the year, I can see if things don't change, that we would not be able to say we can accommodate $114,000 in a $1 billion budget. You're talking about 1%. 1% we would not be able to fund in a budget enhancement. So now that the water is totally drained.
One more question.
Okay, Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you answered this question earlier. Our classified employees are required to be participants in the TRS. Is that correct? Or they can have an option?
Not all. It's position specific. And it varies by position. So not all classified employees are in the TRS system.
But all teachers are?
Correct.
Okay,
And required to be.
right.
You don't have an option.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
Thank you,
Scammahorn.
Mr. Chair. If I could, I just wanted to add too, and he could change it or whatever, but we've already been there, where you're talking, not to help you pour the water out of the glass. There you go. Just 3 or 4 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago, we were looking for just thousands of dollars. It wasn't like cutting the fat off the meat. We were broke. And if you look at it in a human standpoint, when we had those significant layoffs, I think, Mr. Johnson, correct me if I'm wrong, we averaged, $75,000 with benefits per teacher?
It used to be.
So we were laying off not just an arbitrary number, we were laying off 75,000 times X to get into a balanced budget. So that's where the human thing comes in. So yeah, maybe $1 billion budget, but we look at the items, by dollars, not just in the big scheme of things. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Scammahorn. Anyone else? All right. I'd like to, Mr. Johnson, do I understand correctly, 5 mil fair share, because we throw these terms out, not everybody in the room may even remember what they mean. 5 mil fair share is 5 mils of the stated published property tax digest for Cobb County. Is that correct?
Right.
And that is what Cobb County School District owes the state under QBE. Is that correct? The 5 mil.
Actually, it's more than 5 mils.
Okay, please explain, because I want people to make sure they know what's going on here.
In order for the Cobb County School District and all public school districts in Georgia to participate in the QBE funding formula, you have to be a partner with the state, and you have to contribute at least 5 mils of local property taxes. And when we get our QBE sheet, they tally what they think it costs to educate a student, and then before they give us the QBE money, they back out that 5 mils in their formula, because they're saying we need to raise that ourselves. Our local fair share, I think, calculates to approximately 6.2 mils, because the state, when they figured the local fair share, they do not take into consideration our local exemptions. And so when you take into consideration those, it's quite a bit more. And so that's an extra 1.2 mil, which is another $25 million.
And isn't it true that it all assumes that everybody that owes their property taxes in Cobb is going to pay it on time? But we know that in reality, some people don't for whatever reason, but the state expects us to pay our fair share on time. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so that is one of the things that the average person I've spoken, it's taken me a long time to understand it myself, but a lot of people I run into in Cobb County don't understand how that works. And so now we're getting to make a historic vote. Has this board ever voted on a $1 billion budget before?
No, we have not.
So, but I think it's important that people know that this is what's pulling at us. So anyway, all right. Apologize for that, but I wanted to get it out there. Are we ready to vote? All right, I see nodding heads. All those in favor of supporting the budget as reported, motion, whatever, please raise your hand. All right, 7-0. All right, there's no, okay, that brings us, we will now, we've got to, I need a motion to move into executive session for the purposes of, I'm going to guess, land? No, we don't have land. No land? Legal? No legal? Personnel. And a student disciplinary hearing. All right, and we should be back.
Here, well, we have to vote. So I make a motion that we adjourn
All right.
to executive session for personnel and a student discipline appeal, or two student discipline
All
appeals.
right, we got a motion and a second from Mr. Banks. How long do we think we need for this? I'm going to be wrong, but, all right, let's plan to be back here by 12:30 and see how close we get. Thank you. All right, thank you. We are back at 12:28 from executive session without objection. Okay, we're back in our meeting, and now we have items requiring action following executive session. Mr. Ragsdale, sir.
Yes, sir. I know we've got two separate items, but I'll ask Mr. John Adams to start the process.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm pleased to bring you the Human Resources Personnel Report for today, June 14th, 2017. The administration recommends the approval of the identified actions of those individuals listed on the Personnel Action Report as discussed in executive session. We have 6 principal level and higher position recommendations. Michelle Curry recommended for appointment to principal at Norton Park Elementary School effective July 1. Cynthia Downs, Executive Director, Food and Nutrition Services and Operations, recommend you approve her retirement effective October 1. Thomas Flugum recommended for appointment to principal Pope High School effective June 15th. Dr. Dana Giles recommended for appointment to principal at Lindley Middle School effective July 1. Jeff Mosley, Principal Norton Park Elementary School, recommend approve his resignation to be effective June 30th. And Bertha Nelson recommended for reassignment to principal at Ackworth Elementary School effective July 1, 2017. This concludes the personnel report for today.
Mr. Scammahorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we approve the motion as read by Mr. Adams.
Okay, Mr. Banks seconds. Okay, any discussion? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. All right, that's 6-0 unanimous. Mr. Sweeney had to leave to go to a meeting. Okay, next. Oh, one more motion, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There in the bottom part of number 10 says student matter. I'd like to make a motion. I move that the board uphold the determination of the Student Disciplinary Tribunal as discussed in executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Scammahorn. We have a motion. Do we have a second? All right, Ms. Thayer seconds. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. And that is 6-0. All right, thank you very much. Next, we have the approval of the agenda. If there is no objection, all right, our agenda is approved. Let's see, administrative rule modifications.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm going to ask Mr. York to come forward and bring the rules.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, you've had 2 administrative rules for the 10-day review, 1 IHE-R, promotion and retention, 1 JBC-1-R regarding homeless students. Here just to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. York. Any comments or questions? All right, we have none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, and this brings us to board member comments, and we'll start with Mr. Scammahorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to refresh everybody's memory. What happened yesterday. We lost 2 officers here in Georgia. Curtis Ballou, Georgia Department of Corrections. His end of watch was June 13th, 2017. The other gentleman, also officer that was with him, Christopher Monica, Georgia Department of Correction, Georgia. His end of watch was June 13, 2017. Third one, unfortunately, too, is Lieutenant Patrick Weatherford in Newport Police Department in Arkansas, end of watch June 12th, 2017. And I can't stress enough, we are losing too many of our good public servants, just unnecessary violence and just chaotic behavior. Finally, Mr. Chair, please keep their families in your thoughts and prayers. Yeah, I know it's going to be a tough time for them. Finally, Mr. Chair, one of our own 2, Sergeant Mike Young, his in the Cobb County School District Police Force, he's one of our sergeants. He lost his son to a motorcycle car accident, I believe it was Sunday evening. I can think of no greater pain than a parent losing a child, which is just seems so unnatural to the nature of things. But please keep his in your thoughts and prayers. Keep him and his family in mind, because I'm sure they're going to struggle for some time. And that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Scammahorn. Ms. Thayer.
Thank you. Yeah, we've had too many deaths of young people. Thank you, Mr. Scammahorn. I would like to congratulate all of our principals for a successful end of another school year, and thanks for all of our central administration for helping make that possible too. We appreciate everything that all of you did to make this another very successful school year, and thank you, Mr. Superintendent, for leading us through another one. That was another good one under your belt too, so we appreciate that very, very much. I'd like to welcome our 2 new principals to my post at Lindley and Norton Park. I look forward to meeting both of you and welcoming you to our post. We feel very fortunate to have you, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thayer. Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate the Pope High School baseball team for the state 6A championship. And also, they will be recognized this coming next Friday at the Braves game pregame, and that will be the Pope baseball night. Hope everybody in Cobb County will be able to attend that game. Also, I would like to say we had a fantastic graduation this year. Many students are going on to higher level of education. And something special this year, my granddaughter was a senior at Pope, and she graduated. And she got to introduce me during the ceremony. Also, I want to say congratulations to Tom Fulgham, who is now the new principal at Pope High School. Looking forward to working with him. Known him for a little while. Don't know him well yet, but I will for too long. But I'm sure I'll have a great relationship and working relationship with him. Also want to remember Peter Giles, who was had a hip replacement the day before the graduation, so he was not able to attend the graduation ceremony at Wheeler. But I haven't talked to him, I haven't seen him, but From the reports I've heard, he is doing well. He's around, although he's having to use the crutch right now, but the recovery is in progress and is doing well. I want to thank the administration and the teachers and the support staffs in our schools for making 2016-2017 school year a fantastic school year. I think we've achieved a lot. During the last year, we have certified a lot of schools in the STEM area. So we're progressing very rapidly in that area. Our fine arts departments are doing great, looking for ways we can get more people involved in the fine arts. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about. So looking forward to 2017, 2018, see what can we do better.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of echo Mr. Banks, Mr. Superintendent. Great job this year, and to all of our staff in all the schools and everywhere, a great job this year, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to continue to hit that drum, excellent graduation ceremonies. Also want to highlight Mr. John Stafford. I think logistically, he continues to outdo himself every single year, especially the gowns, right? The graduation deals. Robes, what do you call it? Oh, that was your idea? Cap and gown. Well, I didn't have on a cap.
We don't do caps. We don't do the regalia.
Right.
We look good.
Herff Jones, Chris, John Stafford, everybody. It was great, though, all the way around, and happy to be a part of ceremonies such as that celebrate our children feats. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. So, yeah, first of all, just reiterate the greatness about the graduations. It's, you know, it was awesome to be part of the ones that I was able to attend, but it's just that ceremony that helps us keep focused on what our goal is of student success. So appreciate all the hard work from the teachers and all of the employees. Looking forward to students coming back Monday. No, just kidding. Just kidding.
Seems like.
Yeah, I know, right? So, but one thing to mention about that I just find this amazing, because when you compare it, it really doesn't compare to the majority of school districts. But of class of 2017, they were able to generate right at $94 million in scholarship money. And that does not include Hope Scholarship. $94 million. That's tremendous. It really is. And out of those, we had 9 students to actually win the National Merit Scholarship. And half of those 9 were from Walton. The others, Lassiter, Wheeler, Campbell, and Pope. That's just tremendous that we've got 9 National Merit Scholarship winners in our district. And lastly, I want to say that the early kindergarten, I was able to visit, if you've seen the article and that kind of thing, but I was able to visit at Belmont Hills. And, you know, I have to say that, you know, we always use in education, you know, the anecdote, well, you know, if you need to get re-energized, you need to go visit schools and this kind of thing. And it still takes a little bit, but I found myself interacting with those students. I actually got to the point where I forgot why I was there. Wow. You know what I mean? So, and that's cool. And then I realized all the media was there and we were talking about superheroes. So, you know, But somehow that correlated to academic achievement, I'm sure. But it was just real exciting to see those students. They didn't know they were coming to school early. The parents certainly understood the opportunity that they had. And this speaks to that, because out of 23 newly enrolled kindergartners, now that obviously that's not all the kindergartners that's going to Belmont Hills, but 23 are new enrollments. 22 came to early kindergarten. So that speaks a lot about the opportunity that we have. Now, certainly that does not equate to the success that we're hoping to see, but it does equate to the opportunity that we're able to have with these students. And because there were 22 students, that number, we're going to actually be able to keep that class together. So we'll be able to track their academic progress throughout the year and be able to truly compare and contrast, okay, what kind of benefit did we get from the early kindergarten? So I'm really excited about that. Now, I know lastly, but I need to say this as well. Mr. Scammahorn brought it up, but Mike Young's son, we just definitely need to keep him and his family in our thoughts and prayers, because it's, it was their youngest son. But I can't imagine, and I know none of us want to imagine losing a child, but certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to them and his family. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. I would echo what everyone else has said here, and would just also, I was thinking about John Stafford. I participated in 2 commencement ceremonies at my post for Sprayberry and Kell, and it's amazing. You fill up the KSU Convocation Center, and everything, for the most part, comes off without a hitch. Everybody hits the mark, marches in, marches out, figures out how to get out if they can't remember. But the thing is that it's the parents and the students that they're experiencing this, that they want to remember the rest of their life. And so we have an events department headed by John Stafford. It's not just commencements, it's special events throughout the county district. And he and his team do such a fantastic job, and then have to work, when you consider the, 16 high schools, have to line up the volunteers of the 16 high schools to do their part to make all this happen. And then the rest of the year, we're not thinking about what they're up to because we're busy in the classroom or working up here or whatever. So I want to say thanks. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thinking about that and Mr. Morgan's comments, I did want to say something. So it goes without saying, but it needs to be said, the way ideas come to implementation. So about the robes, I had an idea and brought in John Stafford and said, hey, what can we do about this? What do you think? Is it reasonable? And then he got with Herff Jones, and that's how we got the robes. And it's one of those things where John has a team, but truly the things that they are able to accomplish is awesome. And it really speaks to our mission of one team. But having an idea and then see it come to fruition, it's really cool. And it's a good thing too as well. But I just wanted to throw out that accolade for John and his team too.
All right, thank you. So if there is no objection, we are now adjourned.